This is Anne-Margaret Crowe. I'm one of the renewable energy analysts at Edison Group, and it's my great pleasure today to be speaking with Herr Thomas Speidel, who's Chief Executive Officer of ADS-TEC Energy. ADS-TEC is listed on NASDAQ. It currently has a market capitalization of $261 million. And it's best known for its charging stations for electric vehicles. So welcome, Thomas. It's very good to be with you today. And can you begin by telling us what is special, what's very distinctive about the charging stations that ADS-TEC makes and why this is significant?
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for having me here. Yes, I will. So ultra-high charging is very important because people want to charge in minutes and not in hours. So this will be one of the accepting factors for the EV mobility in the future. And we want to do that also on power limited grid. So not everywhere you can pull enough electricity out of the existing grid to charge your car in minutes. And therefore you need a new technology. That's what ADS-TEC has developed. We use a battery buffer in our charger, so we can draw the electricity from the existing low power grid. We store the electricity in our internal buffer, and then when the car shows up, we can add to the electricity being available from the grid the internal amount of electricity. So let's say we boost what is available by what we have saved and stored, and so we can provide up to 320 kilowatt and charge a car in minutes instead of hours. And just saw yesterday in the TV in Germany that grid expansion, which would be the alternative to get enough power out of the grid, is getting more and more a problem. It's very expensive. It takes long. You have to apply for it, and we need grid expansion in other dimensions. For example, for the integration of the renewables and others. So for charging anywhere and everywhere, this is important, and that's what ADS-TEC does. And in addition to that, our solution is very silent, which allows us also to be installed in residential areas. The size is really small, so the footprint is, as far as we know it, the smallest one in the world with that capacity and that power. And that allows us to offer charging in minutes almost anywhere. And so it's convenient for people to get an EV. And last but not least, with a battery in the charger, we can offer multi-revenue models. And I guess that's one of the most important points in addition to that grid issue, because we are not just selling electrons. A normal charger is pulling electrons out of the grid and transfers it from AC to DC and send it to the car. So it's only a power supply. With a battery buffer in our station, you can add more revenue models and more revenue streams. Why? Because the battery can, for example, provide grid services such as peak shaving. We can feed back into the grid. We can use the battery as a flexibility. Just think about linking thousands of these distributed systems together to a virtual power plant, which allows you to trade electricity, store it when it's cheap, when there is excess of electricity in the grid, and sell it or use it in times where, for example, electricity is expensive or even not available. So these multi-revenues allows us to get a better repayment of the investment. And this is very important for our customers. We call them the future power companies. That's all these companies being out there managing electricity, for example, integrating the photovoltaic and also providing grid services, and last but not least, charging. And to finalize the answer to your question, one important thing is, and this is what ADS-TEC can do, we have 100% in-house development. That means whatever will happen in that system, and we're talking about a system including software, hardware, services, digital access, digital twins, we have the ability to act, to provide services for our customers, which I say are the future power companies for decades and not just for years.
Very helpful, thank you. And what has the uptake of the technology been so?
So geographical and where we are, I can share also some reference slides with you, which I will do, but we have more than 500 complete systems, far more than 1,000 dispensers deployed and installed, up and running now. We started in the United States with our key customer, Porsche. Now, you might have seen it in the social media. We have started our own site close to Atlanta in Auburn. We have now new customers where we provide the same technology in our systems, not only now in the European Union, Great Britain, and also in the United States. Maybe I just share my reference. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Now, this is just some examples where we are and what's already done. You see here our installation or some of the sites, just to give you a reference, where we have installed these superchargers, the charge box at Porsche dealerships all over Europe and in the US. Here are some examples in Germany, but also in Switzerland. We see that here in Paris, in France, but also in Sweden. And you can see these boxes are pretty small, almost tiny, and so they can be installed really everywhere. And the dispenser, like on this picture, is separated. The dispensers you see in the background at the parking lot. That's a big advantage, that the box can be separated from the dispensers. And now some other examples which might be interesting for our audience. This is installation in Berlin at a gas station, a normal gas station from BP Aral. And we can see that the two dispensers are at the place where, let's say, normally the vacuum cleaner would be installed. You rip that out and the box is in the corner, so it can be installed directly where the existing grid access is available on a low power rate. And we can see there are residential homes in the background. So there it's important that you have a very silent solution. So otherwise people would complain that the system is too loud for cooling, for example, on high power when you're operating with high power rates. And this system is running now quite some months. And we have a very good feedback because people love it, that they can supercharge directly where they are, close to where you live, and you don't have to go to a supercharging park. Here we see another example. It's for a big utility. In Germany, they have installed a charge park. And also here we see in the background the charge box and the two dispensers. And they have charged over a weekend many cars, even a lot of high power cars such as the Porsche you can see here, and we never ran out of battery. Very important, and this is an example I want to show, is that charging is now getting more and more into the infrastructure. So we say, and if you have heard my last calls over the last year, then one major thing is we believe, we are convinced that charging will be part of our infrastructure, office buildings, factories, hotels, because oil and gas, I cannot drill a hole in the soil and get it out of the ground where I have my own premises or my own office building. But here I can do it. And we see here fleets where people are now using the existing environment by upgrading with the charge box. And so you can have your own supercharger in front of your office. And this is something where we get feedback that more and more companies, and also, let's say, future-oriented, ESG-driven, also office investors or real estate investors are now realizing that charging will be part of the expected infrastructure. So if you have a new condominium or apartment house, then people are not only asking for air condition, for PV on the rooftop, or for an elevator. In the future, they will ask for a charging opportunity directly in front of or as part of the building. And in this case, we can do that even in minutes because, as I said, we can go up to 320K which is very convenient. And just to give you some more references, and then I skip the rest. This is, for example, at the office of a ministry in Germany. It's a Ministry of Environment in Berlin. And here we see for the drivers driving these EVs, it's very inconvenient to drive to a supercharging park. And if you have to have always, let's say, a mobility which is always available, then it is very convenient if you can charge directly in front of your office. And when we talk to, for example, mid-sized companies, but also big companies, then we hear that the more the EV fleet is getting real, and let's say 20-30% of the own fleet is electric, then the management for customers, for people coming along, they will offer super fast charging because they expect that, and it's part of being a modern company providing these services. Just to give another insight, it's not only EVs in passenger cars. We see here an example where we have shipped the first units to Luxembourg, and this is a completely electric bus. And we can see that bus can also charge at the charge box. And the business case here is the operator has realized that it makes no sense to drive back with the bus to a centralized charging hub. It's better to have distributed charging opportunities along the route. So when he makes a brief stop, which he has to do anyway, he can charge in parallel, let's say a few minutes, and get enough electricity to go along the route. And in addition to that, these boxes, these chargers can be used by others, for example, Ubers or electric delivery trucks. And so you have a multi-revenue model also here if you share these distributed chargers. I can show many, many more just to give you also one insight about the commercial industrial, because ADS-TEC is not only doing charging. You know that we are convinced that the platform is the big thing and charging is just one element, it's just one use case. We see many more, such as peak shaving, frequency regulation, and arbitrage, photovoltaic integration. And here are some examples. That's, for example, in Dresden downtown, where the battery from ADS-TEC is providing grid services. We see here combinations with stadiums, with photovoltaic, even in Africa for hospital. We see the combination with AC chargers from other vendors and suppliers when the peak, which would be drawn from the grid, is too high, then we can use our storage systems as a peak shaver. We see the integration in many, many residential environments, such as farms here, but also big buildings. We can see that going down to the level of, or going up to the level of container-based storage systems. So we go, let's say, not in the hundreds of megawatts per site, but in the, let's say, level of 10 megawatt per site. We see here some of our references, which is, for example, Stadtkraft. This multi-megawatt system is running since 2015, providing frequency regulation 24/7, but also here the other examples, whether it's for electrolyzer or cutting the peak for ski lifts and others. So I hope that that has given you a little bit an impression what we do and where we are. And so I stop sharing my screen and hand it over back to you, Anne.
What would you say the addressable market for the technology is?
The addressable market for, so let's talk about the three of our markets, which is the charging market. And I can also share a screen here. Okay, so let's start with the US market. So ADS-TEC has identified up to, let's say it's around 50 billion total addressable market for the charge box. We have that here. You can see how we broke that down, and we see that a lot is for convenience and fueling. We see the fleets, the industry, office buildings, as I mentioned it, retail, condominiums, the existing ones. We believe that charging will be part of the infrastructure. And the segments we broke down, and we did a lot of internal analysis how we see that market in the US, which leads to, at the end, for us, an addressable market size in these segments of roughly 270, 300,000 units, what we can see so far. And in Europe, we did the same. And you can see it's almost the same. It's a little bit more what we can see right now. It's about 60 billion total addressable market, also split into the same segments and use cases. And we see that a lot of is just convenience and fueling, but also the fleets again and industry offices, but also auto dealers. So what we expect is that if we have more and more EVs out in the field, then also the dealerships will provide supercharging, let's say for test ride, or if you bring your car to a service, then when you get it back, that has to be recharged quickly. And so it's quite a big market, which we can see. It's not that all of this is done by battery buffered chargers. Some of them, or a portion, will be handled by grid expansion, or even the grid might be big enough. So this is where we have to look in detail then, and also to develop together with our partners and customers what makes sense in the specific site and use case. And now when we see that the renewables are playing a more and more important role, then we must know that, for example, a local photovoltaic is getting more and more interesting, because with your own photovoltaic system, you can generate electricity, let's say in the range of 10 cents per kilowatt hour, which is very low compared to what you have to pay for a kilowatt hour you pull out of the grid. And that will lead, in addition to the ESG targets and also to the CO2 reduction targets, for example, companies, but also organizations, office buildings, and real estate developers, will lead to the fact that you have to integrate the renewables, also the heat pumps, and not only charging. And if you see now, when you have to take the decision, whether you expand the grid or you integrate the local systems such as photovoltaic charging and maybe a heat pump, and you can provide peak shaving and use just the existing grid like it is, and you don't have to pay for the expansion, and not only the capex but also the opex, then buffers will make more and more sense. And that leads me to the next slide, where you can see the global energy storage deployment forecast. And here I picked a number from Bloomberg, where you can see that we are just at the very beginning, and that here, what we can see is segmented in different countries. ADS-TEC, we are focused on the European Union, Great Britain, and United States. But we see, if you look here, 2020, 2022, it's a very tiny bar, and what is expected to happen in the future. And as you might know, I'm the president of the German Battery Storage Association, and I can see in the complete segment of our partners there, and also the members of our association, that this is what we see, and it's rather a question of material supply and enough people to get it out and done. Regulation plays a big role, but the demand, we see here the demand, and that's massive.
I was going to ask about applications other than vehicle charge stations, but in fact, you've already spoken about that and shown us lots of examples. So I'm going to move to asking some questions about financial performance. So if we look at the first half of 2022, performance was fairly subdued, but you're very confident about the future. So can you talk to us about that, please?
Yeah, of course. When we made the projection for this year, which happened last year, we already knew that material supply is an issue. So lead times have already been very long. And that has been the reason why we projected and also talked in all of these interviews that the revenue will be very backloaded to Q3, Q4, because we knew that lead times of 50 and 70 weeks, which, for example, semiconductors, battery cells, and other core components are still a reality. We knew that. That has been the reason why we have postponed the revenues to Q3, Q4. That was clear already last year, and we have been very honest about that, and we shared that with our investor base. And so that was, let's say, as it has been planned. But then it got even worse in terms of supply. So as we also have announced already in spring 2022, our order book was very strong already at that point of time. So it was over 60 million in spring. So the problem was we have not had the right material on hand to fulfill the orders. And so it got worse. So that led to the fact that we had to replace components and to use substitutes. And on the other hand, that's an advantage of ADS-TEC because we can do that. So we have our own engineering team and we can work on replacements, which we did. But that also, takes time, and we have to recertificate then these parts that we can deliver the product. So that has been very stressful, and not only in the first half, but that are the main reasons why we have been short. So we would have loved to make more revenue, and it's not that we don't have an order book. It was that we did not get all the material on time. That's a reason, and that is also now what happened in Q3, Q4, and I guess you will ask me about that as well.
Well, I think you've covered it actually, but the critical thing is those orders haven't gone away, have they? They've just moved into next year, presumably.
Yeah. So first of all, we had no cancellation from our customer base because we all face the same situation out there. And what we have seen now, when we had the meeting in September, we have been very confident that the materials will arrive to produce and to ship what has planned. But now, so the production capacity at our own facility was not the issue, and that was secured. And for example, just to give you a little bit insight, the boxes or batteries we even had, and also the dispensers. But if you have just some tiny components for a PCB assembly for the power inverters, for example, and you cannot assemble these PCBs, which is done by sub-suppliers, subcontractors from ADS-TEC, then they got stuck. And if then it's going more and more to the end of the year, then you run out of capacity. And if you have to ship it to the US, then it must be available, let's say, at least 12 weeks before end of the year. Otherwise, you won't get it shipped to the US. These are all points which hit us really hard. Yes, we see these orders going to 2023. We see that the material supply will develop in two directions due to the inflation and due to some reduction on the consumer side. We see that, let's say, commodity components might come down. So the availability for these could be better than last year. But we are in a segment which is now the renewable sector and also the EV sector, which is pushed by almost all of the governments around the world. We have seen the projections for energy storage in that slide I showed you. There's exponential growth. And what all of us are using is core components such as power semiconductors. And so and this is what we do. We need to secure material to get that done. And the lead times for key materials here might be still critical also in the future. And what is now our major task is securing all that And we are very confident that we can fulfill all of these orders in not this year, but then will be pushed into next year.
So 2023 is looking pretty good then. You're very confident about it.
We are very confident about the market, about the, as I said, and we have disclosed that as with our order book and also with our production, which is up and running in Germany. Now we started with our site in the United States. Yes, we are positive. And if we get the remaining material issues managed, which we believe we do, then it's positive, yes.
That's great. It's excellent.
Yes.
Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today, Thomas. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
It was a
Bye.
pleasure. Thank you, Anne.